Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to the Soundiron Podcast. I am your host, Craig Peters, and today on the Soundiron Podcast, we talk with composer and percussionist David Oliver, whose intuitively inventive style has brought him to work with award-winning composer William Goodchild in 2012. David later went on to create rhythm ensemble recordings for National Geographic wildlife documentary Ultimate Honey Badger, which received its highest number of Nat Geo views. In this podcast, we talk about his musical background, and he also gives us some insight into the genesis of what became Rhythmic Odyssey, which is a loop-based percussion library that we recently released with him, and so much more, so stick around. Alright, so welcome back to the Soundiron Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Peters, and with me today is Michael Peasley, and we are talking with David Oliver. David, how you doing?
Yeah, pretty good, Craig. Yeah, good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's nice to finally talk to you a little bit. And some of the things that I wanted to talk about is because you have so many drums and such a huge collection, and kind of want to know a little bit about your musical background and sort of how you got into the world of drumming.
Yeah, okay. Well, how far back do you want to go? I mean, basically...
as far as you want.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a little baby now, so he's learning as well. He's been
nice.
He's been nicking my shakers, so... yeah, when I was about 3 years old, I was hitting pots and pans, making dents and everything. So my folks channeled that, and really I sort of just got, I remember being 5 years old and seeing this 10-year-old playing a drum kit, and I thought, that's what I want to do. And it was several years later when I managed to actually do it. But I built my own drum kit. I used a suitcase for a bass drum. Made a bass drum pedal out of wood and elastic, had a golf ball for the beater, and yeah, I just saved up loads of pocket money and bought stuff secondhand and stripped them all down and sort of made my own stuff really, and then I got into listening to music and I started with sort of bands like even during the Blockheads. I don't know if you know them. Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick is a great track. Incredible bass line.
Oh, nice.
Bands like Chic, who was really cool. Le Freak and Good Times. I got into ska bands like Madness, The Specials, and of course Bob Marley, James Brown, Quincy Jones. And a massive influence on me, my dad, who was into big band swing, took me to Buddy Rich, which he's a complete legend, incredible guy.
Yeah.
And he broke a stick during the performance, and I said, I'm going to have that. So I went up to the bass player at the end of the gig and said, yeah, can I have that stick? So he got it for me, and I've still got it.
That's awesome.
That's really cool.
Yeah. In case of emergencies. But, it's kind of nice to feel like you're channeling these guys,
Yeah.
And I started listening to a lot of funk and contemporary rock jazz bands like Stanley Clarke, Weather Report, Carlos Santana.
Nice.
Yeah. And followed solo drummers, like Omar Hakim and Neil Peart, percussionists Alex Acuna, Manolo Badrina, and Trilot Gertu. Pretty much. And I discovered world music when I was about 20, bought some congas, and really got into township music of South Africa. And that was great because I learned that songs can be about anything, even chickens, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Paul Simon's Graceland is one of my favourite albums. So that's a bit of a background.
That's
Awesome.
very cool. So you've been playing drums your entire life. It's sort of you became a person through sort of your love of percussion. I mean, I've known a lot of drummers, and your collection is insane. You have instruments I have never heard of, and I'm sure that's not even all of your collection. That's just sort of what we kind of delved into with Rhythmic Odyssey.
Yeah.
How do you choose instruments?
How do I choose them?
How do you find them, and how do you choose them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few really good shops down our way, and when we play festivals and things like that, I always browse to see what people are selling. And I can't walk past a shop without going. If I see some percussion, I'll go in there and try it out. And if for me if I resonate with it, I'll either buy it or come back later or go away and make it. For instance, I went to a gig in Bath, which is not far from here, and somebody was playing a mouth bow harp, which is actually featured in the Rhythmic Odyssey, and it's what the people of the Kalahari play, the San, the Bushmen, and very simple. It's just a stick with a cable across it, and so I made one using a strip of hazel, which I wrapped around a chair overnight, and then stuck a guitar string on it. And you just play it by hitting with a chopstick and putting it through your mouth. So, yeah, those kind of things excite me. It's basically I go with instinct, something that excites me, I use it. Anything that's got some sort of resonance to me is a piece of percussion. It could be. I expect you as well, Mike. Can you ever walk past a pub without sort of playing the barrels or something?
Yeah, it's sort of, I don't know. It's like some people get into visual sort of stimuli or smells or things, but for me it's the hearing. It's like I can so much sort of emotional and sort of so much meaning is attached to sound. So like how something resonates, how it cross resonates, all the different nodes and sort of like harmonics that are there that can create for me like whole aesthetics, whole feelings that kind of puts you. I mean, like, sometimes they can harken back to a certain song, but sometimes they take you back to your childhood or to like say the sound of a certain kind of subway horn as it's coming to the station. You hear that you might not have heard that sound for decades, but then suddenly you hear it and it puts you there. Just one
evocative
millisecond of sound is all it takes to take your brain someplace. So I think it's the same way. It's like if it can be an instrument, and even if it can't, I mean, we had this big family collection of Native American pottery and carvings and things like that. Thousands of years old. They'd just been kind of collecting dust. And I was like, these are instruments. They have to be. And so we recorded percussion with those for our petroglyph library, because there's so much aesthetic. There's so much, that the reason why you can never just sample one instrument and call it done is because no two instruments, even if they're the exact same type, are the same. Everything, has its own life, its own soul.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, life and soul, the spirit of the drum. I don't know if you've ever read Mickey Hart's Planet Drum. Very highly recommend it. But he talks about the spirit of the drum. So he's also got a massive collection, which I believe has been sampled. But when I am recording an instrument or playing it, I just kind of tune into what the drum, the resonance of the drum, the kind of nuances that it plays, rather than looking up in a book, how is this drum played, what should I do? I just feel my way. It's very much an instinctive thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the thing about resonance of things, in one of the projects, actually I used it in this project as well. I used water drums, which was, I was working with a composer called Will Goodchild, and he was doing a program about otters. And he said he wanted some water sounds. So as I was washing up, I was thinking, what kind of thing can I do? And I was messing around in the washing up bowl. And I turned a pot upside down, started tapping it. And I thought, okay, there's something there. So I took myself off to a hardware store and bought some mixing bowls, some metal ones, after tapping them in the shop. And at some point I realized there was somebody stood over my shoulder while I was kneeling down. I looked up and this old boy was looking at me like, what the hell are you doing? I was just tapping it to see how it resonated. And so I bought a variety of those for about £3 each and got them home.
The water bowls?
Yeah, the water drums.
Or water drums, sorry, water
drums, yeah. In Africa, as you know, they use a calabash with water, so they fill the calabash halfway up, which to listeners is a giant pumpkin hollowed out. So my version was to use plastic mixing bowls resting on top of the water with the metal ones underneath. And I filled up the bowl to the sympathetic resonance, if that makes sense, of the actual, when I tapped the metal bowl. So I found that the frequency of the top bowl was kind of in harmony with what was happening underneath as well. So,
that is so cool.
So that was pretty fun. And it kind of reminded me of when I was a kid, I was making stuff, you know. If you can't buy something, then find a way of making it, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think it's an excellent way of going through life, of sort of, I don't know, learning. I mean, that I think true mastery comes from not just repeating and perfecting the act of playing drums, for example, or other instruments, but of becoming, of caring about the details of it, understanding, you know, that there's so much to explore that you should be able to discover new parts of it years after you've ostensibly mastered it as a skill. It's
completely. It's like with Taiko drums. I hired or borrowed some Taiko drums from a friend, and I have been to her classes, so I learned how to play to a certain extent. And as you know, when you play Taiko drums, they're very dynamic, very physical. The sticks are heavy, and it's a workout, you know.
Yeah.
But I found that that's not what I wanted to do with these drums. I got them home, very, very heavy, and I started tapping with my hands before I got the sticks out. And I thought, hey, there's something there. There's a different tonality to the drums that I haven't heard before.
Yeah, Taikos are awesome hand drums. They're the best hand drums.
Oh, you've played them as well?
Oh yeah. We did a whole big library back at a Tonehammer kind of before Soundiron took off, and it was a great experience just to have a whole bunch of Taikos kind of to myself, just to kind of get in there, and that was the main thing, you know, was playing them as hand drums, because every inch of them is unique. It's like the ultimate. I mean, frame drums were kind of mind-blowing when I really started getting into those. The big ones, you can get some amazing tonality out of them.
Yeah, very true. And using muting with the hand as well.
Yep.
You can get sort of harmonics as well with them.
You can even get palm bends like you could off a tabla. You can do that where you tap it with your middle finger and then slide it with your wrist. You have that with a big Taiko is like, boo. It's insane. It's awesome.
It's amazing.
I mean, it's tricky because tension starts to come into play to find that right balance. But they were just such fun to play like that.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's not necessarily about how much you've spent on an instrument as to whether the quality of the sound you're after. I guess it's like fine wines. I'm no expert on wines, but you know, you can pay 10 times the amount for one wine, but it's not 10 times better tasting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's true of all instruments. I mean, the best of the Taikos they had some really nice, you know, sort of like professionally made ones, but then the best sounding one to me was the one they had made themselves out of wine barrel. Yeah. And, you know, stretched the skin themselves, and they were, you know, almost embarrassed about it because, like, you know, it had been a learning experience, but it by far was the best sounding, the most in tune and most kind of like rich. I think that's just true of all instruments, though. It's like because the fundamental properties of sound, they're kind of democratic in a way.
Yeah,
they just work. You know, sometimes you can find an old garbage can that sounds beautiful. Like,
absolutely.
And so the idea that, I mean, you can perfectly craft something to the right specifications and then use the best materials, but if something goes wrong or there's something about that wood that the grain didn't line up and, you know, maybe it just didn't sound good, whereas some cheap old drum or guitar, it just got lucky. It just sounds awesome. And that's the best drum. It doesn't matter that it was, you know, a fraction of the price of some grand, you know, like signature drum from some you know, it really, I think that's the cool thing about music, is you can't buy quality at the end of the day. You've got to make it.
Yeah, you got to make it, and also we've got to use our ears. You know, you can spend money and think, oh, I've got the best thing there, but when you use your ears, you may find, you've already got something that's just as good.
Yeah.
I've been out busking when I didn't have a drum, and I just use a guitar case, and it just sounds great. At one festival this year, there was a guy that's a fantastic percussionist. We kept talking about having a jam, but he was playing many times and I was playing many times. We kept crossing over. A guy called Rowan. He's such a cool drummer, and he's a bit like Troilert Gertu. I don't know if you know Troilert Gertu. Plays sitting down and hands in every direction like an octopus.
Uh-huh.
In the event, we didn't have time to have a jam. I just finished. He'd just finished, and I was emptying my calabash out with water, which was great fun. I got so into playing it. Actually, I mean, it's a huge, great thing. And at some stage, I'd thump it with my fist while I'm playing the kahoniko and the frame drum and the djembe all at the same time. And the water splashed up in my face. It was great. So it's superb fun. And so as I was getting rid of the water, some guys came up to me and said, "Hey, that's sacred water. Can I douse myself with it?" I said, "Yeah, be my guest." So a couple of guys actually stuck their whole head in it, and like they were apple bobbing. It's a English tradition. I don't know if you have that over there.
Yeah, when we were kids, I remember that.
Yeah. So anyway, he anointed himself with the water. So I went over to the water hole, basically, or the place where I got the water from, and this guy Rowan was around there. He said, "Hey, let's have a jam now." So at that stage, put the calabash down, and I was just drumming on a bucket. He had to go on the calabash. We just connected like that. It was just synchronicity. It was great fun. So we didn't need all our array of gear. We just connected that way. And I find music, for me, is just my way of communicating. You know.
I mean, and it's of all the instruments too. The percussion, voice and percussion are sort of the fundamental, because like anything is a drum, you know, and it's like, well, if you've been a drummer your whole life, everybody around you has probably noticed that you're probably constantly finger tapping on everything around you.
Yes, right.
You know, it's like getting in or like you're leaning over your car, and then you just suddenly notice that the hood of your car has the coolest sort of bass tone if you hit it with the side of your thumb just right. Suddenly you're just sitting there for 5 minutes, and people wonder what the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
There's times I've tapped my bare foot on the kitchen floor, and I'm like, that sounds like a kick drum.
Mm-hmm.
Like it has like a metal kick drum, because it has that sort of splat to it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wonder how that would sound if you recorded it and EQ'd it and stuff.
It would sound awesome. I mean, that's it. You got to get the microphone up in there and just get it, because it does. If you use the right mics in the right position, you can sometimes really capture that hard to find sound. If you live the world with your ears, but so many people, the way they mic instruments, they put them at this weird arm's length, and you lose all that body, that oomph that you can feel in your guts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. I mean, we learn how to mic things by experimentation, and standing on the shoulders of giants, of people that have done it before. But there are some times, like harking back to what the Beatles used to do. As far as I know, something I was told about is that they were experimenting with Ringo's drum kit, and they stuck some slabs of meat inside his bass drum just to see what it would sound like. And with the saxophones, they rammed the microphones right down inside the chamber. So I think the thing is, for me, it's don't follow too many rules. As long as there's not phasing going on, I keep moving the microphones around until I think that's captured what I'm after. There's something interesting there.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly wearing headphones as I'm, setting the microphones up and listening to and tapping and retuning and isolating noises and things like that, little glitches. And one thing that happened to me while I was had my headphones on, that the cables got caught up. I'm sure they've got a mind of their own. And I bent down to pick up the cable, and as I came up, my head hit one of the temple blocks, and it just made that comedy sound, which is a bit like a champagne cork going. So yeah, that sort of lightened the concentration, because as you know, it's a serious business when you record stuff. But
yeah.
So at the same time, it's fun, but it's you've got to be really alert and listen to what's actually going on. So your ears just learn as you go, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of like closing your eyes and trying to see with your ears.
Yes.
And sort of looking for the light, looking for where the light is best.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's crazy how things sound different when you close your eyes. I have a friend, he's a mixer.
Okay.
And when he would be listening back to mixes, he would close his eyes, and I was like, why do you do that? He's like, it allows me to hear better. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I would start doing that. And like, you start noticing way more things than you normally would, because your eyes can distract you from looking at certain parts of the waveform or a plug-in on your computer or something. It totally zones you in, which is really cool.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it definitely heighten those senses.
Mm-hmm.
I've not actually recorded with my eyes closed, I don't think, but but I do like listening to music with my eyes closed, so it really helps me sort of focus on things.
My hand-eye coordination is not so good. I've tried playing drums in the dark before, or like eyes closed, and I start missing a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
Hit your knee with a drumstick.
Yeah, I identify with that one, definitely.
But I don't know. Maybe it's a good practice technique, though. Maybe perfect your hand placement. It worked for
Stevie Wonder. I mean, he was a fantastic drummer. Not
a
lot of people actually know that, but you guys probably do. But he played a load of drumming and did solos as well. Did a lot of stuff in the studio. So yeah. It's great. So he's one of my heroes, actually. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he is.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you got into composing and writing music for media, because you've done some stuff with the BBC and National Geographic and PBS. And how did you sort of transition from just sort of being a drummer and doing that sort of thing to actually getting into writing for National Geographic and stuff? Like, what was the transition?
Yeah. Oh, well, that happened by chance, actually, Craig. I'd written and published a number of songs and instrumentals for a music library, and I'd made a series of loopable ringtones for BlackBerry mobile phones. I dipped into the world of app developing. I made a loop-based app for Apple with animated cartoon characters, where you'd swipe a new drummer, replace him with another one, or a guitarist or bass player, and you sync them up to jam, based on MIDI bass loops that I'd recorded, which are all in the same tempo and all in the same key, but playing different patterns, which was fun. And I think it was a primitive seed for this particular project. It was a child kind of thing, but it had a similar sort of underlying basis for it. To be able to mix and match, I mean, that particular project was a bit like Misfits, that child's game where you put a different head on a different body and all that sort of stuff. So basically, what happened was I met Will Goodchild, a UK composer. He's an amazing musician. He's a conductor, orchestrator, all-round good guy, and he's supremely talented. And he was basically giving a lecture about music for TV, and I went along and introduced myself and said hi. Didn't actually tell him what I was doing. That was just a friendly kind of chat, really. And about a year later, a friend of mine who's a Mac engineer was helping me out, and he was helping Will out as well, and just recommended my African drumming skills to him. And Will made a note of that. Okay. I think I've met him before. And he basically phoned me, got in touch and said, I'm working on a project, thinking of doing some live African drumming. So do you want to give it a go? And at that stage, I didn't have any track record of recording for TV and film. And that was in 2011. Actually 2012, yeah. I met Will in 2011. Mm-hmm. He loved what I did. So he basically sent over some string parts, and I just layered it up with a whole tribe of African percussion. he loved what I did and said, "Okay, we'll send you over some more. Let's talk about money and everything." So, I was really surprised. I didn't know what animal it was about. I knew it was a wildlife program. It was full of intrigue and energy. It turns out it was about a honey badger.
So honey badger don't give a shit.
Yeah, you're right. A formidable, fearless little animal he was. They've got this thing where their means of attack is to charge backwards. They are not afraid of anything. Mm-hmm. They'll go in there after snakes and all sorts. So it's pretty dramatic. So I recorded it with sense of mind of being out in the field in the African bush. So I decided to keep it quite rustic. And just have a bit of fun with it. I did a lot of close miking. I layered up different, not sophisticated kalimba, but it was some very cheap ones I'd got in a shop. And the notes, I didn't have all the notes in each one kind of thing, so I just layered them up until I got more sort of melody going there. Mm-hmm. And what I noticed about that is that Will took the stems and he chopped them up and he moved them around and created new pieces out of what I'd done, and it got me thinking. That's what they want. So I didn't get too attached to anything I did. I would just record everything I thought would be useful, and just sent them all over. And it just occurred to me I'd like to do more of that. So I decided to invest more energy and concentrated in it, and got in touch with people and. It was a great start because Will's got a great reputation. So when I approached somebody, they'd say, "Oh, you've worked with Will? Oh, great. Okay, let's check you out." So I invested more time and equipment, bought more instruments, and just continued playing live as well, because that I really find that adds to my recording and my inspiration. You know. So that's in a nutshell how I got into it. It was completely by chance, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny how sometimes that just kind of randomly happens. Like you don't really expect that to happen, but you just kind of by who you meet, and then just kind of fall into cool opportunities like that. And
yeah,
are there any other like projects that you've worked on as far as composing for media that you've enjoyed, or any other things that you're working on as far as the composer aspect goes?
Yeah, I basically a guy that was doing the mixing for Will. I was chatting with him, and he was saying he loved what I did on. I think he said it was Frozen Planet, and I said, "Oh, I didn't work on Frozen Planet. That was a David Attenborough documentary." He said, "Oh, I'm sure you played on that." Oh, never mind. Okay, well, if you haven't worked with Barnaby Taylor, I should suggest I'll put you in touch. So after I put the phone down, I just pitched to Barnaby and said, "This is what I'm doing. I'm available if you need anything. Just get in touch." And probably about an hour later, he phoned me up and said, "Great, it's perfect timing. I've got a project coming up. It's a BBC film about elephants, and we need some rustic." Sort of drumming, African drumming, and that became a very interesting project for me because Barnaby was asking for kind of interesting ideas, and so I went to a hardware store and found some rusty jerry cans, and he'd mentioned bicycle spokes as well. So, well, yeah, I stripped down a bike and started using that. And also,
there's a lot. I mean, the jerry cans. Yeah. Actually, both instruments are in Rhythmic Odyssey. The jerry cans are really musical. Like there's like the very fat tonal kind of quality, and that you get this kind of a simple two-tone melody effect going.
Yeah,
I really love those.
Very, very useful. I played around with them a fair bit with different padded sticks as well, and just worked out the sweet spots basically. And hitting them on the side as well, and that worked out really well. So, in that particular project, which was Elephant Family and me, I did a fair number of drumming parts that actually kind of made it to the final cut in the form that I recorded them in, which was great. It's great to have stuff in there, whatever's going on, whether it's cut up or whatever. But this one was quite integrally intact. So that was fun. That was a fair bit of creativity as well, because I recorded some kalimba parts, fresh, brand new, I bunged a load over them to Barnaby on Dropbox and said, have a listen to see if there's anything you like in there. So he homed in a few things and pieced some of it together and just it did his magic with it, really. Then he sent it back to me and I fleshed it out, and then he put some incredible a piano and guitar and strings and bass, and got some other guys involved with that as well. So that was really good fun to do. Interesting ones, apart from the Ultimate Honey Badger, which I told you about. I did some work for Warhammer, which is the video game.
That's awesome.
And one thing that stood out for me was this creature called Skaven. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but yeah, this sort of rat-like mutant creatures who they're bloodthirsty and they wield these swords and they're very erratic, and their favourite number is 13. So I thought, okay, well, let's get behind the headlights of these things, and I thought, okay, let's do something random every 13th bar. So I played a gong in an unusual way. So it wasn't like a dinner gong; it was getting the harmonics out of it. And I recorded a bicycle spoke played with a blade, a carving knife, just to get some sort of, how the sound of swords clashing, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have that sort of spark sound to it.
Yeah, that was the kind of thing. And I used that. There's the jerry cans in that one as well. I layered them up, so I played them with beaters and with brushes as well, metal brushes, and also layered them up with Velcro. I close mic'd Velcro, ripping apart, and made these kind of random sort of explosions of energy, which sounded kind of erratic. So that was good fun to do. And actually, that took me on to some of the cues that are actually in Rhythmic Odyssey. I can't remember the name of it now, but there's one in particular that has that kind of flavour to it. So yeah, that's a few of them. Yeah, there's plenty of others, but those kind of stand out.
Let's start to talk a little bit about I think what Rhythmic Odyssey is sort of about, which makes it a really special library. So I mean, you're talking about being able to create these elements that can be mixed and matched, used by the composer, and in a sense, on the base level, that's what Rhythmic Odyssey is. It's this huge collection of all of these loops from all sorts of different kinds of instruments, where each of the loops is an individual instrument or a small submix of related instruments, and but then beyond that, each loop is built in the structure of a song. So you have a song, where it begins with an intro, then the next loop is more of a building line, and then the next one is building, and then the next one's kind of a crescendo, and then finally the last one is sort of is like a release or a big build up and kind of finale or fade away.
Yeah.
So, but then you have that with all of these complementary tracks. So you'll have like a slit drum part and a snare drum part and shakers and an udu, and like the water drums, and each of those will be a separate track with the loops that work together vertically, if you stack them up, horizontally over time to build, but then you can also mix and match from any part of the library, any instrument track, from any loop, from any song, and put them, in any order you want. So it's like you have these inspired, like the idea of the songs is that they're inspired. They're a fully formed creative picture. These layered, percussion elements with low end and high end click and or shakers, or like it's like a full well-rounded meal. All your food groups are there.
Yeah.
And with all the vision of that progression from the beginning of a track to the end, but then broken into essentially a grid, from top to bottom and side to side. So you get these Lego bits, all these little elements that you can then click together from any other part of the library.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's when you first kind of came to us and like we started talking. It was like, so that's what you were that's what you had this vision for, and we got into the tracks. You recorded so much content. It was insane how much we had to.
Tell me about it.
And then to break it down and condense it into this structure. I mean, the file naming conventions on the loop is insane. I mean, I'm a dork, so I love naming conventions and that sort of thing, library organization. But it's complicated, but it's elegant. It's really cool how you kind of see the big picture, which is how do you sample a performance in a way that gives you that same multi-sampling kind of access, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. You gotta take it all apart, break it all down so that you can manipulate it, and so many different sonic sort of textures are here, so you can if you're looking for a particular genre of groove, well, that you can look for. If you're looking for a particular sort of geographic region, like African instruments or Asian instruments, that's also something you can look by. You can look for all sorts of different sort of subgenres of instrument or subgenres of musical performance and break it down onto that granular level.
Yeah, do you know? I'm amazed how you've put this together. To be honest, I think it's fantastic. It's way beyond what I imagined you could possibly do with it.
We've kind of pushed Contact to about the limit of what it's really currently able to do with just due to the got to pull a lot of audio data in there and a lot of zones. So we're pushing it to the edge, but it's really cool that we wanted to make sure that you could get to really take not only get access to these loops, but then what can you do with them? So you can reverse them. You can play each slice backwards or forwards, or where you're whoop, 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 the sound, or where you can actually just play the slices out of sequence or randomize them. You can play individual slices, where each slice is a beat or a couple of beats, where because some of these tracks, they're not just like boom, 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 it's like and then it's got layers, textures. So that whole thing, you break that into slices and you can make your own groove out of it, or you can augment the groove that's there by playing individual loops, like as if they were individual multi-sample percussion on top. You can put different effects on different tracks or different loops individually, and with a full kind of effects rack, and send and receives to do delay and reverb, in addition to the main effects rack on the back end, where you can just make the whole mix go through whatever crazy combination you want. The idea was like, okay, so David's given us this amazing like gold mine of like creative percussion content, like little micro phrases, or whether you use the loops individually or kind of like these complete motifs if you want to use them as full I guess you could call them songs, but they're kind of like songlets. They're like 2 minutes ish, so they have enough time to build, but obviously since they loop, you can extend them or rearrange them, mix and match them, so there's like this endless potential. It doesn't just stick to one genre. It really covers an amazing gamut. But we wanted to be able to say, okay, well then, but how do you make this even more sort of infinite? Now can you take these fundamental grooves, and if you ram them through distortion or like a convolution effect with some crazy effect impulse to give it some undulating, underworldly sound, suddenly you can create something that had the life and the energy of David's performance, but where the sound's just transformed to get sort of that, so that, you can do a lot of sound designy type work, or you can do EDM music or industrial or glitch or hip hop, trap. There's there's a lot of rock stuff in that have like the standard beats, but if you want to something that's more rich and instrumental, there's quite a few drum kit grooves in here too as well.
Yeah.
But this library is not really built, say, around of like I got a drum kit, rock loop library. It's not like that at all. Like it's so much more rich, so much more full than just simple cookie cutter stuff. There's they're really kind of intense, well crafted performances, really well chosen.
Thank you.
Instrumentation where a song, like each element you've chosen to put together into this sort of matrix, they really work to and I think that's sort of what makes this different. Why we're so fucking excited about it.
Yeah,
like this has
great.
been something you spent ages recording it, and then it's taken ages to sort of edit it down and build the finished product. But the idea that this is kind of as close as we can conceive of micro sampling live drum performances, in a way that you can access.
It's great because you can dive into individual phrases and individual beats as well. When we first started talking, as you know, I prepared a number of pieces just to show you what the idea was. But then we talked about the scope, and you told me what was possible. So then when I went away, and it was the best part of a year altogether, bearing in mind what you'd said about being able to dive into beats and things like that. So a lot of the phrases, a lot of the pieces start off with the phrases quite simple, and then I gradually flesh them out. So the way I like to work is I come up with a pattern while I'm walking or just lying down or something, or waking up in the middle of the night with an idea, which happens. Not the best time to do it, but anyway, and that might be just an unusual pattern in like 7/8 or something, and I can imagine the fullness of the piece. So then I approach it with, okay, I'll strip stuff out until I've just got the basic where the accents may be. So I start playing the accents at the beginning, and then gradually flesh them out throughout a piece. So you've then got sort of individual hits that have got long decay on it, so you can home in on those. Because as you know, Mike, when you're hitting a drum quite fast, when the waveform is dying out, you hit it again before it's had a chance to die off. So it was important that we had plenty of drum hits in there. You could then sample individually. So there was a lot of method to the madness, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about it is it's so dynamic. I feel like when I first started diving into the library, I was just like, wow, like I feel like it just puts you in the space where you recorded it. And it's like being in a room with a bunch of drummers. And it's just crazy how dynamics, the first word that came to mind when I was playing around with it, I was just like, it's so natural, but then once you start getting into wanting to manipulate the sounds, then I feel like it makes it to where anybody can sort of make it their own. Yeah. So it's like they're taking what you did and then just, as far as you want to go with it. That's one of the things I really liked about it.
That's it. That's the whole point of it. This isn't about, this is a showcase for my performance. I had very much in mind the end user, the composer, to inspire them, but also gave them flexibility to create something brand new. And just the compositions that we've heard so far just blew me away. It's just ideas that if I'd come up with those, I'd think, oh, wow, that's incredible. So it's great that
demos are just the first demos we started getting in now. They're phenomenal. We'll probably lay some into the background of the podcast.
Yeah, just amazing. And it sort of reinforces, this is why we've done it. This is because people have got excited about it. I mean, basically, when I started off, I thought, okay, there's different methods of approach, isn't there? You can think I can plan it all out like an architect would, and just tick off everything you've covered. Every beat's BPM, every sort of tempo changes, time signatures and different drum sounds. But didn't work like that. I decided I'm going to work by what excites me. You know, if I'm feeling one way, feeling quite energetic, maybe I've just done a great gig or something, and whilst playing that gig, I've come up with something in my mind, or actually played it and thought, right, I'm going to take that home with me and just record that. Or I'm out walking or whatever, and yeah, I'd just get back and think, okay, I'll do some fast taiko style drumming, and then gradually, as the whole sort of project went through, I filled in the gaps as I went. I just get a feeling of, right, okay, I need to do something a bit more down the line, a bit more ambient or quite simple. And then I would think, okay, I need something a bit more unusual. Okay, what have I got? And I look through my collection and just grab something different and just have fun with it. And the layers of stems that I came up with, there was method. I understand what you're saying, Mike, about having a method and enjoying it, because I used the color coding in Logic and worked out a rainbow. So yeah, I started with shakers and I colored them in yellow and went all the way down. So yeah, well, rainbows don't start that way, but my whole map had a color coding to it. So I covered every piece has got the frequencies from really high to really low. And a lot of them were sort of written on the kahoniko, which is, yeah, it's a beautiful instrument, just to get the fundamental rhythms. And then I would possibly strip that one out later on and add something else, and then other things that didn't start with that, I'd end up putting the kahoniko in there. So that features quite a lot in these pieces. And it's just sort of the versatility of sound. I would then review it as you would if you'd written a book, each chapter one by one. I think, okay, because sometimes you're very close to things and you think, okay, I need to get the variety in there. I don't want to repeat myself. So I'd listen to the whole thing and think, okay, that piece there, yeah, I'm going to ditch that one and record something brand new. So even up to the release last year when I submitted it in October, it was I was still coming up with ideas. So, but then the editing kicked in, and boy, that was intense.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, that was it. 'Cause I didn't want to kill the live feel, the live performance, because that's the whole point. The whole point of the project, from my side, was to do something that bridges the gap between MIDI and live performance. So
that's the thing, is getting stuff that's alive to fit to a grid so that it loops cleanly is a challenge. And I think that was one of the that's basically why it took a year to do post on this. We deconstructed, reconstructed the content, but you had already done a brilliant job at performing it so in such a lively human way, and yet just right on the beat, right on, but not in a sterile way. Like, there's nothing sterile about this library, but at the same time, it does click in you can lock it to beat, and it works.
At that lot, that there was many slices I made actually when I finished recording, because the best will in the world to keep it bang on the grid when you're drumming. So to make it seamlessly loopable, I had to make loads of slices and just move stuff over just a tiny amount, just to get it so you'd avoid any glitches and things like that. So, but once you've done that, you notice that the beat just before that has got a bit more space in it. So then you've got to go back a few phrases just to adjust those as well to get them to, like I said, without killing the liveness of it. So I had to, I couldn't mechanically go through that and just press a button that said slice and sync, because that would have killed it.
You got to do it by hand.
You got to do it by hand. Yeah. And listen to it over and over and over again. So it's been incredible to be involved with you guys. It's what a journey.
Yeah. It's crazy to see it kind of come to that final sort of step. One of the things I wanted to mention too is when you were you're talking about how you in the beginning, as you started working with media composers, you'd sort of be handing them these tracks and then having them chop up and edit them, because I mean, and that's still a way a lot. I mean, this thing it's programmed as a virtual instrument for Contact, but there and there's a lot of crazy stuff that you can do in it because of that engine. You can completely you can apply effects, manipulate playback and just do some insane stuff with it. But a lot of people, they just want to be able to get that stuff, get their hands right on those WAV files. And that's the biggest, big component of this library too, is that it's built so that you can do that too. It's almost just like David is sending you these stem tracks, and you can just start dragging them into your DAW, whatever DAW you use, and just like lining them up and chopping them up, doing whatever you want. Running them through your own effects, flipping them, bits crushing them, whatever the heck you want to do. And that's what's cool about it too, is that you can. There's no limit. There's no restraint on like how you can manipulate these files to make them work for you.
You think of the number of permutations you could get. The mind boggles, really, doesn't it? It's infinite, because not only, I mean, yes, there's the mathematical number of possibilities you could just by recombining these hundreds. I mean, it's like 6,000 samples. So that any of those can be combined with any other, obviously. And then you can do crazy stuff with the effects, and then reversion. I don't know. That's not really a word. Reversion. But it's like I like
diversify.
Where you can like reverse individual slices and stuff like that. You can get crazy with it. So it is infinite, and it's fun. But I think that's the sort of core thing here, and for us, the structure and the framework, we're really excited about, like, sort of exploring this pathway, seeing how people interact with it, how they feel about it. But it's a really it's a really different way of looking at it, that it's sort of like it's been the way we've been wanting to look at it for a while. Like, how do you do a loop library without that sort of limitation, without that sort of like, well, I've sort of pushed this thing as far as I can go. I'm going to start repeating, like, everybody using this is going to sound the same. It's like, am I just not? There's a way around. It just break it down. It's the same way that the multi-sampling. The multi-sampling had to evolve that way, from just just record the one best note I can get out of this. No, you have to record a bunch just on that one note. You got to get every velocity and bunch of round robin, so that you can start to get that human variability, natural
that's
sort of
that's
dynamic.
It, because like with digital drum kits, it's incredible samples. But if you play a roll on a snare drum, I know they've worked quite hard on getting it. Sometimes it can sound like a machine gun, because the samples are just repeating the same thing every time. But that's not how a human plays a drum. So
that's always been my biggest complaint about V-drum kits, is that not enough of them are really built to directly, with no latency, tap into large sample sets. Yeah,
what I'd really love to do is have a virtual drum that I can play a taiko drum from, with sticks, and have it bigger than the normal sort of 10-inch or whatever it is, and just express it like that as well. So that's, as far as I know, that's not out there yet, but that would be great to have it.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a couple of really cool percussion controllers that try to get into a lot of playable zones so you could get something like, a big drum. I mean, I guess we're talking about different things. I'm imagining sort of the hand drum thing, that detail, like, give me a lot of zones, give me a lot of velocity layers, so that I can, really lay it out, like almost like it was a percussion keyboard, but that nuance, like it. It'd be really neat to see a much more detailed hand percussion controller that is meant to be used most directly with deep multi-samples. I mean, there's a couple out there. I think I've just not. There's that one that uses these like hard, I think, ceramic finger, where you tap your fingers on them. I forget what they're called.
Okay.
I'll have to look it up. There's a couple out there. Maybe something is available already that can offer that sort of thing.
Well, that's the thing. We've had thousands of years of playing instruments, and now we're trying to recreate it. Actually, back to Rhythmic Odyssey, that was one of the things, isn't it? It's having that human thing. So a lot of the instruments that are in there, I deliberately kept them sometimes a bit grungy, a bit loose, and avoided sort of the cliche. Although there is a few sort of rhythms in there that you'd think, oh yeah, I've heard that before. That's a little bit like James Brown or something like that, something funky. But I'd record it differently, play it a bit differently, and slightly different tempos and things like that, and just add some crazy things in there, like playing a bundle of wicker in there, and what are different types of rattles and.
But it all works. They're just these different textures, but the performances are fantastic. So
great.
First off, it's like even when it's a weird, unusual instrument like wicker sticks or cocktail toothpicks, things like that.
Yeah, right.
But it's still, there's a deliberateness that it just, it when you hear it. Like it's sort of like, it just, your ears just said that's an instrument. That's something that you would expect to hear. That's what you would expect to hear there, in that context, in that rhythm.
Yeah.
It's so all these sounds. It's I think that's kind of it takes our general sampling philosophy. You've kind of just applied that to in a performance way of just like get in there and get the soul of each instrument, and now bring it to life.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the purpose of it. So it's great to hear people have been inspired using it, and whether people like to start from drums upwards or some people like to add drums afterwards, that's not a problem. The way it's laid out, if you've got your tempos already sorted out, you could just go through the library. And just find something that fits the mood of your song. But also, if you want to be inspired by something that you find in there, then create stuff over the top. Composers are very often under a lot of pressure, so time is time is a constraint very often. So, like you said about the WAV files, once you're familiar with the way things are laid out in the project, you can build something very quickly. Like you've built the favorites in there as well. So if people have sounds they like to use quite often, then they can get them in their project.
Yeah, you can sort by different keywords, and star your favorites. We try to make the experience in Contact as close to a simple, as far as browsing goes, as close as to like a nice simple browser as you can get in Contact. So it's kind of. It's kind of a different sort of browsing method than I think you typically get to have in Contact. It's not just a big drop-down menu. We try to get a full filter system going.
Yeah.
So you can drill down. You can kind of create your own custom list. I was gonna go with this. I think that's one of the cool things about the Wave library too, is that because of the folder structure. You've done production work. That's where Greg and I came from. Stevens and I came from. Back in the video game world is you had to have a simple way of navigating through the content. So the Wave sample library is built, where it's divided up by track, and then the loops are sequential. The idea being that you could just go into the song you want and just pop open each directory and drag them into your DAW, sync them to grid, and that's just it. And the tempo, the time signature, so you know exactly what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And you just drag them in, and then they just line up like little building blocks, and then next track under that. We try to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
It also includes David's wet mix, where he basically, it's the full stereo mix of that whole song with all tracks into one stereo blend with a little bit of reverb and just kind of sweetened. And then there's a dry version where it's just straight up completely bone dry as it was recorded. Same thing, just a mix. So those two are there for easy use. If you don't want to get into super granular level. You just want these sort of finished performances. That's there too. That's also there in the Contact version as well, where there's just the main sort of stereo Contact preset is basically that wet mix, so you can just get right at the stereo stuff.
Yeah.
Just to hear that fully. All right, here's the whole loop with all the instrument parts, mixed in, so it's all kind of right there where you need it, perfectly balanced.
So I thought it'd be cool to talk a little bit about the recording process and get some insight into where you recorded, how you recorded it, and just a little bit about sort of the different decisions that you made when it came to the recording process for Rhythmic Odyssey.
Yeah, I mean, I recorded the vast majority of them in my home studio, which is a converted barn in a very quiet neighbourhood. Well, it's not a neighbourhood, actually. It's a fairly remote place in Somerset. So it's fairly quiet. There's very little traffic, if ever. So yeah, I've sort of converted part of the room into a drum booth, and I've got a clear sonic drum booth with heavily padded, because basically any room sound I want to get rid of it completely, because recording for media, you need to have a much flexibility in terms of the reverbs that you can add afterwards, so it's all completely dry. And I also recorded pine logs in a pine forest using a small handheld recorder.
Got some pictures of that in the user manual gallery, and then on the site. It's like literally they're straight up logs. It's really cool.
I was just walking through the forest with a mate, and saw somebody had made like a bivouac, a little hut, and they had like a picnic area where the logs had been felled, and somebody had put them across, presumably to make a shelter or something. So I just jumped down into the ditch, grabbed some sticks, and started drumming on these, and thought, wow, these are great, I'll come back again. So went back and got the sampling equipment and just worked out some patterns and thought, okay, what does that sound like? So it's amazing actually that huge logs can sound so high pitched, and it's not necessarily the deeper ones that make the deeper pitch. Sometimes do you know what kind of forest it was? What kind of trees were they? Yeah, pine forest.
Pine. Yeah, I mean, I guess when they're dry, pine gets pretty hard, and I think that's where it's when they're still wet and soft. You're not going to get as much of you're more going to get a kind of a dull, wet thud out of them.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It was springtime coming into summer, so it was a beautiful time to do it. Which was great fun. Yeah, so it's basically those two locations, really.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
With all the different instruments that you have, do you have any favorites? Is there any ones that you tend to choose, or is it more of a feel thing? You go by just how you're feeling that day, or do you have any that are just a little bit more special to you than others?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about favorites that I play a lot of, that's slightly different to favorites that I pick for a recording project, because when I'm recording a project, I've got a completely blank canvas, and I just think, okay, what does this piece actually need? What will enhance it? The thing about the music for film and media and TV is that you don't want stuff to stand out in the wrong way, kind of thing, But so I don't get bogged down with it. I just dive in and record something. Whatever shakers I'm using, and then work from that. But in terms of my favorite instrument, it's got to be the cajonico, which is in the library, which I mentioned earlier. It's a beautiful instrument, and it's made by one guy in Israel. I played one at a festival a few years ago, and just started messing around in it, and I was so into it. I was sitting by a fire, and before I knew where I was, there was people dancing around me, and I thought I was just falling in love with this instrument. So I tracked down the maker, and he sent me some audio samples and pictures of different ones that he'd made. He's also a cabinet maker as well, so these are works of art. They have somebody actually said it's got an aura of its own, which I totally agree. It's so well made. I mean, I'm still discovering sounds that it can make, and this won't mean just anything to people who aren't drummers necessarily, but it's a cajon, but it's it's like a bongo. It's a small cajon, and normally it sits across your lap. But I made a stand with my partner, and she sort of upholstered it so I can sit cross-legged while I'm playing it as well. So I can play it like
that's cool.
Yeah, I can play it like you would
cajon.
Yeah, a cajon or a normal drum kit, because the snare on it is fantastic. It's like a acoustic drum kit, and it's got a snare release on it on both sides as well. So you get
you get instant access.
Yeah, instant access. You can play a high-pitched snare on one side or a low-pitched snare on the other, and when you hit it in the middle, you get like a bass drum sound. So it's very portable, and also because it's so well made, it's the quality of the wood and craftsmanship. It records brilliantly as well. So that I find that very inspiring.
That's awesome.
I've got one instrument that doesn't actually appear in this library, but it may appear in an update. Who knows? It's called a sansula. I don't know if you guys have heard of the sansula. It's a form of kalimba, and I believe it's made in Germany or Switzerland. I'm not sure. By a company called Hokema, and it's got a floating head on it. Basically, there's a little matchbox sound chamber, matchbox wood, with these little pegs like a normal thumb piano, and you can get a wah-wah sound out of it by lifting up one side when you're playing it on a flat surface. It's quite unlike any other kalimba I've played, and the first time I tried one, I just kind of fell in love with it. You know, you have some relationship with an instrument, and it's something that our little baby loves as well, because it's got a sort of enchanting quality about it as well. So yeah, that's probably two of my favourites. I could be here all night. I love the calabash as well. I've got so many.
I know, it's like having hundreds of kids. It's like, how do you pick which favorite when there's, all of them have their own sort of unique qualities to them, and yeah, it's really cool. It must be fun to just walk into a room and just see all these different instruments and be inspired. And
yeah, it is. And I try and use as many as I can. When people see how much stuff I got, they say, "Oh, that's wow. Do you use them all?" And I say, "Well, pretty much. I mean, as you can tell, I've photographed them for this library and this project. And yeah, you got a heck of a lot in there."
Yeah, there's a lot of instruments. Like I think it's about 130, give or take, because there's some that are kind of like little subgroups.
Yeah,
but it's crazy. It's we included all those pictures there in the user manual, so you can check out every single thing that's in there. It's great. It's pages and pages.
Yeah, I mean, just for people's interest. I mean, ultimately, when they're hearing something, it's about the audio. It's what it sounds like in a project, but it's just kind of interesting to see. Oh, what was that? Like, for instance, there's an unusual one called a gobiju, which is a one-string Indian instrument, which has got a flexible. I'm not sure if it's bamboo or some sort of wood up either side. When you squeeze it, then the pitch changes. So it's essentially one note, but it sort of changes in pitch.
Yeah. It's good to be able to. Yeah, that's what's cool is like, because if you're looking at the directory names, say, or in, and you're trying to figure out, all right, well, what's that instrument as you're deciding whether you want to use it? Well, then you can just take a look at the picture.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean,
kind of see
names like Kryn, which is actually a log drum. So it's called a Kryn log drum in the project. So you should be able to dial in what you think it sounds like or whatever, and you've got an idea. You've got a description in the title as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap it up for today.
Okay.
And thanks a lot, David, for taking the time to talk to us and kind of taking us on a journey through your synthesis as an artist, and the process through which Rhythmic Odyssey kind of came to be.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Craig.
Yeah, thank you. It was awesome talking to you.
Well, thanks, guys. It's been great talking to you.
So we want to thank you for tuning into the podcast, and we had a lot of fun talking with David and getting to hear all of his interesting stories about his career and how he came to be a media composer. And the music you're listening to right now is actually one of the demos for Rhythmic Odyssey. And if you want to get more info on Rhythmic Odyssey, make sure to visit our website at soundiron.com for more info and listen to some other demos as well. So if you like this podcast, make sure to let us know what you guys think and leave us a review, and also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and all other places that you can find it. So I want to thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.